June 7, 1944. Normandy, one day after D-Day. The sky hung gray, drizzle clinging to the thick bocage hedgerows, a living maze that turned the French countryside into a deadly trap. Down a muddy lane, Panzer IVs and Stuggy 3s of the Wehrmacht roared, steel tracks grinding through the muck, carrying with them the belief that German armor would hurl the Americans back into the sea. Across the hedge, American infantry lay in wait. They had heard those engines all morning. M1 rifles and grenades would never stop steel. But this time, on a young soldier's shoulder rested something new. The 2.36-inch M1A1 Bazooka, a 6-kilogram rocket launcher light enough for the trench, powerful enough to pierce panzer armor. The air was heavy with damp earth and gun smoke. As a Panzer swung around the bend, exposing its 80mm flank, a terse order snapped. Fire! A streak of white smoke spat from the tube, the M6A1 rocket shrieking forward. It slammed into the tank's side, the blast shaking the bocage, flames jetting through seams, the crew screaming in choking black smoke. An American gunner wrote in his report, "We never believed this tube could kill a Panzer until we saw the beast burning before our eyes." And on the other side, a Panzer Lehr officer scrawled in his diary, "These new personal weapons make my men feel tanks are no longer invincible." In Normandy, where fighting was measured in meters and every corner could hide an ambush, the bazooka did more than burn tanks. It shattered the Wehrmacht's illusion that armor was untouchable. It was the moment America placed technology in the hands of ordinary soldiers and turned infantrymen into tank killers. It bore a humble name, the bazooka, borrowed from a comedian's musical instrument. But on the battlefield, there were nothing comical about it. Officially, it was the rocket launcher M1A1 and later the M9. For the first time in history, an ordinary infantryman could shoulder a weapon powerful enough to kill a tank. Before this, destroying a Panzer required heavy anti-tank guns weighing tons or cumbersome anti-tank rifles. Now with a steel tube barely 5 feet long and weighing around 6 to 7 kilograms, any soldier could become a tank killer. The secret lay in its M6 heat rocket, a shaped-charged warhead. Unlike kinetic shells, its lethality did not diminish with distance. If it struck, a shot at 20 meters was as deadly as one at 100. Against the Panzer IV, the Stuggy 3, even the Tiger I, when hit in the flank or rear, the rocket could turn a steel giant into a fireball. The Germans were stunned, dubbing it Ofenrohr, the stovepipe. After the white smoke trail it spat with each shot, they rushed to copy it, producing the 88mm Panzerschreck, reverse-engineered from bazookas captured in Tunisia in 1942. But by Normandy, the bazooka was already in the hands of every American squad, ready to turn the bocage into a graveyard for tanks. It was not glamorous, it was not expensive, but it gave each soldier a new power, the power to turn armored beasts into wrecks. Summer 1944, Operation Overlord begins. Over 150,000 Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, opening the decisive front in Europe. But beyond the sand and steel obstacles, a deadly challenge awaited them: German armor and the bocage countryside. The bocage, towering hedgerows of earth, roots, and stone, turned the French farmlands into a labyrinth of death. Around every corner, down every narrow lane, a Panzer IV or a Stug 3 could appear without warning, shredding a squad in seconds. American troops were horrified to see panzers lurking behind the hedgerows, striking and vanishing like phantoms. Previously, U.S. infantry were almost powerless against armor without artillery or air support. But in Normandy, fog, bad weather, and dense hedges often blinded aircraft and silenced heavy guns. Towed anti-tank guns were far too heavy to maneuver in the cramped terrain. That meant one thing: the infantryman himself needed a weapon to face the Panzer. That gap was filled by the bazooka, a cheap, compact tube carried through mud and brush. It became the American soldier's life insurance against the Wehrmacht's steel beasts. One U.S. officer later admitted in his report, "Without the bazooka, we could not have survived those first days in the bocage." In Normandy, where every path could be an ambush, the bazooka was not just a weapon, it was the difference between life and death. The bazooka, on the surface, just a 1.37-meter steel tube, was in fact a leap forward in infantry technology. The first M1 model, introduced in 1942, suffered from unreliable battery ignition, so by Normandy, most American troops carried the improved M1A1 with simplified electric firing, soon followed by the M9 with a collapsible tube for easier transport through hedgerows and trenches. Weighing barely 8 to 7 kilograms, it was light enough for a single man to shoulder. Yet its true power lay in the M6A1, M6A3 heat rockets. According to the U.S. Army Ordnance Test Report of 1943, these rockets could penetrate 76 mm homogeneous armor at 90 degrees, enough to destroy a Panzer IV or Stu G3 when struck on the flank or rear. Against the Tiger I, however, its 100 mm frontal armor remained impervious, forcing U.S. infantry to rely on ambush tactics. Compared to its contemporaries, the bazooka's character becomes clearer. Germany's Panzerfaust carried a massive warhead capable of punching through 140-200 mm of armor, but its effective range was a suicidal 30 to 60 meters. The 88-mm Panzerschreck, reverse-engineered from bazookas captured in Tunisia, delivered even greater penetration, but at 11 kilograms and 1.64 meters long, it was far too cumbersome for close combat in the bocage. The British Piat, spring-powered and weighing 15 kilograms, had formidable warheads but was so unwieldy and punishing in recoil that soldiers grimly dubbed it the pain in the ass. As for the German Pak 40, the benchmark 75mm anti-tank gun, its 1.4-ton weight made it utterly impractical in Normandy's narrow lanes. What truly shocked the Germans was not just performance, but availability. While Panzerfausts and Panzerschrecks were only beginning to trickle into units, the United States had produced over 450,000 bazookas by mid-1944. Zaloga, U.S. Infantry Anti-Tank Weapons, 2008. In Normandy, this meant that nearly every American squad had a launcher, turning every hedgerow into a potential anti-tank ambush. One Panzer Lehr officer bitterly confessed in his diary, "Tanks are no longer invincible. At the sight of a single man with that tube, my crews shiver." The bazooka was not the most powerful, nor the longest range, but it was cheap, light, and everywhere. In Normandy, it was ubiquity, not perfection, that turned the bocage into a graveyard of panzers. On June 13, 1944, Carentan, the small town linking Utah and Omaha Beach, became a pivotal battleground. Exhausted paratroopers of the U.S. 101st Airborne had seized it, but Wehrmacht counterattacked with a thrust led by Panzer IVs and Stuggy IIIs of the Panzer Lehr Division, their steel tracks grinding through wheat fields and into the narrow streets. The Americans had almost no heavy anti-tank guns left. only scattered bazookas in the hands of small squads. In a letter home, Private James McNerney confessed, "When we heard the clanking tracks in the distance, my heart sank. The whole platoon had only one launcher, and I wasn't sure it could stop a Panzer." McNerney letter, June 15, 1944, National Duck Cover Totem Museum. As the lead Panzer rounded a corner, a bazooka team fired from between two ruined houses. The M6A1 rocket streaked out, white smoke enveloping the alley. The blast tore into the tank's flank, flames erupting from its engine deck. The 101st Airborne Division After Action Report, June 1944, recorded dryly, "One Panzer IV destroyed by infantry weapon, Bazooka." Chaos rippled through the German column. The remaining Panzers tried to maneuver, but bocage lanes became traps. By mid-morning, 3 German tanks were burning, their attack blunted. A paratrooper later recalled, "We survived not by numbers, but by the bazooka." Before, hearing a Panzer's engine meant certain death, not anymore. Interview in SLA. Marshal Bastogne, the first 8 days, 1946. On the German side, a Panzer Lehr officer scribbled bitterly in his diary, "My tanks were destroyed by U.S. infantry personal weapons. This had never before occurred on the Western Front." Bundesarchiv Militär Archiv, RH 273810. To Wehrmacht commanders, the bazooka was no longer a nuisance. It was a nightmare. Carentan proved that victory no longer required 155 mm howitzers or P-47 Thunderbolts overhead. In Normandy's bocage, a single determined soldier with a bazooka could break the spear point of German armor. The hunters had become the hunted. Carentan was only the beginning. Through June and July 1944, the bocage of Normandy became a graveyard for German armor. Panzer IVs, Stug 3s, even the mighty Tiger the Orange, symbols of Wehrmacht power, were knocked out by white smoke trails from American bazookas. The Germans were stunned. They had believed U.S. infantry helpless against tanks without artillery or air cover. Yet in Normandy, a single squad, or even a lone soldier, could halt an armored thrust. A German officer reported, "Panzer crews are losing confidence. They no longer dare advance without infantry screens." The results were unmistakable. In battles around Saint-Lô, Caen, and Carentan, dozens of Panzers burned, not from 155 mm howitzers, but from small launchers slung over American shoulders. German counterattacks shattered against hedgerows, where every thicket might conceal a bazooka team. What was meant to be a defensive advantage for Wehrmacht, the bocage, turned into their death trap, enabling bazooka ambushes at lethal range. For U.S. troops, the weapon transformed morale. Where once the growl of a Panzer meant certain death, now they could strike back. A soldier of the 29th Infantry Division recalled, "For the first time, we felt the Panzers were not invincible." For Germany, the shock was profound. Wehrmacht scrambled to rush Panzerfausts and Panzerschrecks to the front, but in Normandy, it was already too late. German armor, the backbone of Blitzkrieg, was for the first time broken by Allied infantry at the very front line. The bazooka did more than burn tanks. It shattered the myth that German armor could never be pierced. The bazooka was not just a weapon, it was a message to the entire Wehrmacht. The age when German tanks could advance without fear of infantry was over. Before Normandy, Blitzkrieg rested on the belief that Panzers, with firepower and armor, could break any line. But with the bazooka, that belief faltered. Now every American soldier could be a potential tank killer. This forced Wehrmacht to adapt. Panzers could no longer advance alone. They had to be shielded by infantry at all times. The numbers told the story. In the summer of 1944, hundreds of German tanks were knocked out not by Thunderbolts or 155mm guns, but by 2.36-inch rockets fired from the shoulders of infantrymen. At St. Lo, bazookas helped Americans cling to every yard of ground during Operation Cobra. At Caen, they blunted Stugs and Panzer IVs in narrow streets. And when the Allies finally broke out of Normandy, the psychological blow was clear. German armor no longer held absolute dominance. In the long run, the bazooka set the template for the world. The Germans copied it with the Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck. The Soviets developed the RPG-2 after the war. From then on, the concept of the personal anti-tank weapon became a cornerstone of modern military doctrine. The great lesson? In total war, it is not always the most complex or expensive weapon that decides victory. Sometimes a cheap, simple, mass-producible design placed in the hands of ordinary soldiers can change the tide. Normandy proved it. The bazooka shattered the myth of Panzer invincibility and paved the way for the Allied march into the heart of Germany. Normandy, 1944, the battlefield where German panzers believed they would crush American infantry. Yet with nothing more than a simple tube, ordinary soldiers turned the tide. The bazooka, cheap, small, unassuming, instilled a new fear in the Wehrmacht and ushered in the era of the personal anti-tank weapon. History is not only written by massive cannons or tanks weighing dozens of tons. Sometimes it is the simplest tools in the hands of ordinary men that create turning points. If you want to discover more of these overlooked weapons and forgotten battles that reshaped the war, from the beaches of Normandy to the fields of Russia, stay with us. This is Oblivion Archive, where memories long buried return to light, reminding us that even the smallest details can change history.